There's a lot of people selling stuff, so I just want to give this out for free. I want to share what I learned from these 10K courses worth of value in less than 10 minutes. Okay, so right now you're probably getting targeted by your favorite sales guru for their high ticket closing, inbound closing, or whatever the they call it these days. The truth was, I actually took a guru course, got my first client, bombed, and I realized I had to start all over again. I had to read most of the sales books that you see on Amazon. I had to network with really seasoned salespeople and inbound closers, and I even studied the sales gurus like Russ Rufino, Dan Lok, Cole Gordon, and Jeremy Miner. I even invested in the people I love, including Scott Alford, Blair Enns, Chris Voss, Michael Stainer, and Chris Do. And this is tested. This is a very similar script that we used when we were doing 250K per month and scaled to 500K per week. I've used this for coaching packages, digital marketing services, and real estate and a lot of other things. And like I said, it's just a way for me to just give back to the community. The only thing I ask is that just promise me that you won't sell for some crypto scam or some scammy coaching guru. It's just not worth it in the end, and that's all I ask. Although some of you will probably break that rule anyways. But most of all, it'll just give you a starting place just to practice. Also, if you want a copy of the sales script that I'm covering today, I'll leave a link to sign up for my newsletter and free masterclass, which has all this in it. So let's jump into it. Let's cover some caveats. Selling is not what you think it is. It's not pitching, presenting, convincing, or manipulating someone into a decision. The goal is really to inspire the prospect into making a decision. And I think Chris Do paints it perfectly. This script covers the hard skills of what to say, but there's still a lot of soft skills of how to say things, the delivery of things. Some of the soft skills that I'm thinking about are things like tonality, labeling, mirroring, buffers, pausing, and the script does not cover this. Third thing I know a lot of y'all will miss is reading this verbatim. Don't do it. There's a lot of nuance that goes into it, and that's where experience comes to play. The goal is not to ask every single question on here. Personally, I hate the word script. The way I tell my students this is to think of it as a menu. Like when you're eating, there's an appetizer, there's a main course, there's a dessert, but you get to choose what goes into those things. And again, that's where experience comes to play, because you know what's kind of appropriate and what's really, really awkward and weird. But knowing that a lot of you are young kids, most likely you guys are going to ignore this advice and do it anyways. Oh well. At least I warned you. So remember, it's not a script, it's just a framework. The other thing that you should know is keep in mind, you need to customize it to your target avatar. My script or framework changes from client to client. How I speak to people in B2C to B2B to even B2E changes. And every industry is different, and the language I use varies from industry to industry. Also, objections will not be covered in the script, and there's a neuroscience component, which I'll probably cover in another video, but is the main pillar of all these questions. So let's dive into it. Let's start off with the intro. Hey blank, this is Kevin from XYZ Business. How's your day treating you? Keep it super cash. And a lot of times people will just ramble on, they'll talk, so I like to just jump into it. So great, well, I want to be mindful of our time. So you ready to jump in? So it's a very subtle way of like, hey, let's get to business. Let's see why you're actually here. I provided a little bonus for you because sometimes they're like, oh yeah, like, okay, so Kevin, I just want to skip to the pitch. Just pitch me, present me, and all that. They're like, why should we work with you? And I always joke with them. So I left a little toggle here, and this is how I respond. I keep it very playful. I'm like, well, first of all, I appreciate your eagerness to work with us, but the truth is, I don't know if we can even help you in the first place. So would you be against having a deeper conversation to figure that out first? Something like that. That's how I usually answer, or something like that. All right, so now we're in kind of like the discovery phase. So when it comes to the discovery phase, I'm thinking a few different things. Can we even help in the first place? Would they even benefit from working with us? What the real problem is, because a lot of times what they perceive the problem isn't the actual problem that they're going through. The timing of the solution, whether they're actually a financial fit, and also the most important thing, discovering the current state and future state and identifying the gaps that they're having as well. So let's kind of dive into this. So first of all, a lot of sales trainers will tell you a lot of different things. They have their own signature sales process where they hit certain things. Jeremy Miner has NEPQ, Cole Gordon has his own processes, and also if you're doing more traditional stuff, spin selling, situation, problem, implication, needs, they're all very, very similar, but this is the way I like to do things. I just like to simplify things. So connecting question. This is just to kind of build initial rapport, understand why they actually booked a call with us. So it's like, so I should probably ask you, what made you want to reach out to us today? The key thing is like, you can word it any way you want. I would probably word it in a what type of question, just because it's more neutral, it's less bias and all that. Great way to start off. I've heard some people say, what's on your mind? It's all relatively the same thing. Basically the question is like, why did you book with us in the first place? Right? And so this anything else is actually from, I believe, The Coaching Habit, this book right over here. It's a really great resource. Is there anything else is a very powerful thing because it allows for elaboration. And a lot of times the things that will kill your deals are the assumptions we make, or it's the concerns that kind of we sweep under the rug because we didn't ask. And so this allows our potential client to feel like they're being heard. And the neuroscience of this, it allows their prefrontal cortex to turn on. So basically things like critical thinking and all that are turned on, while the fight, flight, or freeze response or survival response is kind of shut off. One other thing I really like to do is ask, hey, how did you find out about us? Very simple question. And it's really good for kind of the marketing aspect too. So let's cover the next part, situation or background questions. This first question is from Chris Voss. The situation or background questions simply are trying to figure out their current state and future state. So where they are right now and where they want to be. So one of the questions I usually ask is like, hey, what are you hoping to accomplish by working with XYZ? X can be like a service provider. So if I'm a digital marketing agency, I'd be like, hey, ideally, Kevin, what are you hoping to accomplish by working with something like a digital marketing agency? And so they'll talk about the goals, they'll laundry list everything. I always ask, hey, is there anything else that you'd like to add to that? Another way to kind of get their goals out is like, hey, what's motivating this conversation today? I got this from Chris Do. That's another question I really like too. Something I like to understand too is like, hey, how long have you been considering something like this for now? So it gives me an idea about how long they've been on the market for, how seasoned they are, how much research that they've done. There's a lot more to this, understanding their personality type or TRACOM or social styles that we'll cover in another video. And then I got this from Chris Do pretty recently, and it's actually from the book, The One Thing, which I have right over here. It talks about, well, what's the one thing that you like to accomplish that will make everything easier or unnecessary? Very powerful question because it forces the prospect to or potential client to really focus their thoughts and really prioritize their needs for their business. If we were to accomplish that, what would that do for you? Knowing the impact. Kind of going like a bit further out of order, but that's really cool. And something that's really important, especially if you are the service provider, is like, well, how would you measure success? Or what would success look like? Or for each of these objectives, what's the metric that we'll use to determine to see that it's been achieved? This is all from Pricing Creativity and Blair Enns, really, really great guy. And Blair Enns also has the book, The Win Without Pitching Manifesto, which is a really, really great book. Not only does it help avoid a nightmare fulfillment process if you're the business owner and you're like actually servicing these people, but it also helps determine the value of the efforts for solving this problem. It helps quantify it. And a lot of times if they can't quantify it, or sometimes if it's not that important, then it's not really an important problem to solve, which means no sale to begin with, right? So it helps us kind of really understand their situation a little bit better. That is the situation and background problems. Now let's go on to the next section, problem questions. I think of these as like the obstacle. I refer to them as the gap, right? So if we have the current state and future state, the gap is like what's preventing them from being able to do it, because if they're able to do it, then they wouldn't be in a conversation with us. Really simple way. I got this from Chris Do. What's keeping you stuck? Or what's getting in the way? Sometimes this is really important too. You can also ask like, how did you come to that conclusion? This is really important because it allows us to really use tactical empathy and really put ourselves in their shoes and really kind of understand how they think. What are some of the important things that they need to consider when making a decision? And sometimes when they have a laundry list of like problems, sometimes you can ask, so what's the real challenge for you here, right? Making them think a lot deeper about the real challenge. It's a really subtle way, and this question's pretty powerful. Also got this from Chris Do. A lot of times I like to kind of assess the impact of those gaps and problems, and that's where a how question really comes into play. It also activates the prefrontal cortex, which is, like I said, the executive function or critical thinking, empathy, all the stuff that we want when we're trying to make a really tough decision. So we ask, how has this problem or obstacle affected you so far? How would solving this actually benefit you in your business? And this one I got from Jeremy Miner, where he asks, like, is there anything that you like to change about your current marketing or your current situation? If you could. That's a really powerful question. Sometimes people in their head, everything's going really, really well. It's a very subtle way of asking, hey, what are some of the problems that you're going through, in a very positive tone? That's a really powerful question. Now let's go on to solution questions. So before this conversation, have you done anything so far to resolve these problems? What I've realized with like a lot of sales calls I've audited or working with different organizations is that they fail to ask what the prospect has done before or what the potential client has done before. It's kind of like in a relationship when you give unsolicited advice and they're like, I already did that. You weren't listening, blah, 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 blah. It's the same dynamic over here. It's like understanding what they've done so far so that you can understand what was missing in the past, why something didn't work from their perspective. One of the questions I like to ask is, are there any options that you've implemented, considered, or eliminated so far? Meaning, are they considering any other vendors, like other companies, or have they tried anything in the past, right? Why did they eliminate those decisions? What were some of those key decision things too? And the whole goal is not to manipulate them at the end, but especially if you're in the customized services arena, you want to make sure you customize something that will actually benefit them. If you're like, if you have set packages, it's a little different, but this is something I keep in mind is good business practice. Another question I have is like, if they tried something in the past very similar to your industry. So let's say if I did digital marketing and they had a previous digital marketing vendor, I always like to ask, well, how did those previous solutions work for you? And then they'll probably name all the great things that they liked and all the things that they didn't like. Sometimes people would be like, I didn't really like the cadence, they weren't really communicative. And then we can ask questions is like, is there anything that you like to change about that previous situation if you could? The next question that's really important is, have you considered the option of resolving this yourself or in-house? This really kind of asks the question, like, why haven't you kind of done it yourself without using a why question because it's very accusatory? But it makes sure to understand like, well, why don't you just kind of solve this problem yourself so far? And it helps them critically think through the problem. Again, we're going through one of the Chris Do things that we talked about earlier.
The goal of sales is to inspire the prospect to make a decision, not to tell them what to do. You do this by helping them to think through their challenges. You don't tell, you ask.
So there's that. And then there's the consequence question. Of all the questions, these are some of the most difficult ones. What are the implications? What happens if they do nothing? I got this from one of Jeremy Miner's videos, but I had to ask you this, but what will happen if your situation continues unresolved? I edited the wording of it because he says like ramifications, or it's too biased, right? So I made it more neutral. Notice a lot of my questions, I try to keep as neutral as possible. I don't try to sway them one way or another. It's really, really important to do that and just eliminate the sales vibes that people freaking hate and they're super hyper aware these days, right? My goal is I never look at myself as a salesperson. I look at myself as a consultant. So another way I can ask this is like, well, what are the potential implications by leaving your situation unresolved? So it's a very subtle way of like, rather than asking like, what happens if you do nothing? That's another way that you can ask, but basically that's what we're asking. And sometimes people will give like a very positive answer, like, no, everything's going great, we'll just figure it out. And like, if they have a very positive attitude, it's not to be the buzzkill, but it's really to get them to think again, like, why are they on this call? So sounds like things are going well. That is a label, my friends, from Never Split the Difference. Sounds like things are going well. So why not stay where you are though? This whole sequence is kind of from Jeremy Miner's right over here. He talks about it in his live streams. Well, how important is it for you to resolve this now though, if at all? I like the if at all part, just because it gives them a way out. Is that something that you're willing to settle for? And so let's go to qualification questions. These are some of the most important questions because it really helps you identify like, how urgently does someone want to work with you? Possibly, right? It doesn't mean that they are going to work with you. And also, can they meet your minimum level of engagement? Meaning, can they actually afford someone like you before you dive into a deeper conversation about presenting and all that sort of stuff? So one of the questions I like to ask is like, if you were to go ahead with a solution, I guess when would you consider starting? Notice a few things. We're not like saying that with us, right? We're not being assumptive. We want to eliminate all that. When would you consider starting a solution? Like a solution, could be us, could be someone, right? That's from Jeremy Miner. This other question is really important. Chris Do calls it addressing the ghost in the room. A lot of people, basically it's a decision maker question, right? So is there someone who isn't in this conversation that would be influential in making a decision for a solution like this? This is where you can find out the stakeholders, right? For B2C, it's probably like a wife, but I don't like dealing with that. But for like, if there's a vendor selection process for bigger companies, it might be like, oh, a CMO or someone like that, or like the founder. We get to identify this before we kind of dive into the weeds. And if they were in the room, what would their concerns be for a solution like this? This does twofold. Not only do we understand like the decision makers, but we also understand what are their top concerns with engaging into a solution like this, right? Also, another question I like to ask is a minimum level engagement question. This is from Win Without Pitching Manifesto. Chris Do talks about it, and from pricing creativity. Basically, we're just trying to see if the potential client can make our minimums, and if they can't, we just save all our resources. Of course, there's ways to like do fundraising and all that sort of stuff, but this is beyond the scope of the video today. So even before going to a presentation, something I want to be upfront is like the money aspect, right? A lot of times people will just like think about it as a roller coaster. It goes tick, 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 tick. The money drops, and then there's survival. Like you get the anxiety and all that sort of stuff, and then you get the fight, flight, or freeze response. But by addressing money earlier in the conversation, you lessen that impact, and they have a better idea of what to expect. So the question I like to ask is like, so I want to be mindful of your financial situation and want to make sure that an engagement like this isn't just premature. We'll discuss more about your specific needs, but there's two ways to ask this. There's one where you can just state the minimum level of engagement. The minimum level of engagement to work with us is X dollars over Y months. Do these numbers sound like something that you could possibly work with? Very simple. The second thing is the level of engagement to work with us can range from X on the higher end and Y on the lower end. Do these sound like numbers that you can possibly work with? Where in this range might you be prepared to invest, if at all? It's a very simple framework to kind of just see where they're at, what their budget is, without asking what's your budget. Because when you ask what's your budget, they'll be like, it depends, it doesn't matter, it's the value, which is never true. They just don't want to give a number first. But this uses the concept of price anchoring, where you want to start off with the higher number first and end with a lower number second. It's basically price anchoring. All it means is setting expectations with the potential client that you're speaking to, especially if you're in the customized service arena. Last thing you want to do is propose something that is way out of their budget that they weren't expecting. It wastes your time, it wastes their time. You're just saving and respecting everybody's time. So after this, there's a transition, right? There's two different ways that you can handle these calls. Number one, so if it's a longer sales cycle, usually that means a more expensive item or more complex type of things. Like if you're doing B2B or B2E, typically it's going to be multiple calls before anything kind of solidifies. This is also for more customized services too, right? You want to make sure you get things right. If you scope out the project wrong, then you're stuck with a nightmare client. That's the last thing you want. So how I entered this is like, so the next step for me is to look at all these variables, get a sense of the different ways we can help you achieve your objectives, and just create this X amount of dollars in value. We'll develop some options and then come back and present them to you. On the high end, it will be about $200K or X amount of dollars if we're able to come up with a guaranteed solution. But of course, we'll have some options below that, including telling you what we can do for you for whatever the lower bracket is. We can do that, but what do you think is best? So a lot of people like want to control and posture and like be very demanding and stuff, but it's like being in a relationship being told what the to do. People don't like being told what to do, and it triggers a fight, flight, or freeze response. By letting them decide, they'll say, yeah, that's appropriate, or that would work for me. Okay, and if that's helpful, let's book a tentative time to discuss some possible solutions, right? Tentative is the key word here. Meaning like it's not a hard time, but like, if something comes up, then we just cancel, we'll reschedule the meeting, right? That's what it's communicating. So there's that. If it's a simple sales cycle, meaning it's like the same call, the one call closer. And I hate these one call closer people because it's way more nuanced. Not every call will close on the first call. People make some broad generalizations with that, especially if they're more seasoned and it's a more longer engagement. It's going to take longer, and that's okay. So simple sales cycle would be, well, based off what you told me, what we focus on could potentially benefit your situation. And so like I do a mini SWOT analysis. I'll cover their strengths, I'll cover this is like kind of funny because I'm actually doing this real time, weaknesses, opportunities of resolving the problem, and the threats of not resolving the problem too, right? Is there anything you'd like to add to that? So that's just asking for clarification too. Really important to get feedback. Again, you want to make sure that they feel heard. And then really you can walk them through the next thing. So at this point, we can walk through the entire process of how we can help you reach your goals and resolve some of these problems if you like, but you tell me, would it be appropriate to go over it at this time? This is straight from Jeremy Miners as well. Works very, very well, very low sales pressure. Then you have your presentation. Every presentation is going to be a little different, so that's why I didn't cover it. But typically like you'll break it up into 3 to 5 phases, and so it's a very organized type of thing. That's a whole nother chapter in itself. But after you do this, like what I like to do is like check in. Are there any questions that you want me to address at this point that I haven't so far? Perfect. Based off our conversation, you mentioned the primary goal is to XYZ. With that being said, would something like this actually benefit you? So you're just trying to see, is this actually helpful? And it gives them the option to really say no. You're not pressuring them. How would you see something like this working out for you? It kind of helps you understand their perspective, and And how important is this for you to possibly implement right now though? So more of a timing aspect. And then it's time for the investments, right? So last thing that we should cover are the potential solutions. So it would be helpful to go over it this time. And in terms of the solutions, there's usually three things, right? Usually it's do it yourself, done with you, done for you. Done for you is going to be the highest. And you want to start from highest to lowest. Again, price anchoring, right? And so after you drop those solutions, I like using words like I want to be respectful or I want to be mindful of your situation. Do you feel like any of these solutions could be what you're looking for? Realistically, is this something that you can implement that will actually help you get to your goals that we discussed earlier? And how important is this for you to implement right now though? And really the last step is the commitment step. A lot of people think closing, it's really scary and stuff. That's why I don't use words like closing and stuff, because it's just like, it's very slimy and stuff. So really the next step, if we were to move forward, and I'm using words like possibly, potentially, things like that, being very non-assumptive, not assuming that they're going to close or anything. There's this saying like assume the sale and never do that. So really the next step, if we were to move forward, is to one, make an arrangement for an investment. You can do something like a card, do XYZ terms of service, welcome call, whatever, like every single process is different for every organization. After that, we'll get you set up with the rest of the team and make sure you're good to go. And then this is the key question. Would that be appropriate? Or how would you like to proceed from here? There's a lot of ways to word it, but it's all saying the same thing. We could do this. These are the next steps. What do you want to do from here? And if you did your job right and you're not triggering their survival state and you're activating their executive state, that neuroscience piece, they should be able to make a decision that's best for the business. That's my script in a nutshell. If you want a copy of this, make sure to sign up for my masterclass, which is free. I'll throw in the comments and descriptions below. Anyways, if you like this video, here's another video that you may like. I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.
Champagne Perrier, finished friends on my face.